There's a question about purpose on our TSL Online Saturday call. It's April 1st, April Fools. Boom. One of the old school TSL guys is getting married today, which is really, really cool. We're going to the wedding later, and I'm stoked for that because that's just a good feeling. But we have this question that came up on the Austin Men's Development Board. If you're not on that, you should. It's free. It's pretty good. There's a lot of great stuff about it, but it's a free board. So as somebody described, I'll augment his quote, but it was great. He's like, yeah, there's 15 whiny assholes and 400 like dudes from Africa who are just trolling it. But there's also some guys, there's really good advice. And there's really great advice. And the purpose of it is to be that. Now, there's also our paid boards where a lot of the bullshit gets cut. And that's some awesome stuff. You know, a guy was going through a breakup on there. Man, there's like instantly tons of like people making videos for him, people calling him up and giving him the support system that he needs. And that's where it's at, man. You know, having guys around you who have succeeded and failed in ways that you're going to is huge. And that's what we've built. All right. So if you're starting out, I mean, I can't recommend highly enough Austin Men's Development, but a free board is a free board. But we were talking about purpose, and we were talking about the pursuit of purpose. Whenever we're in this, it's really, really important. Okay. When we're in the pursuit of purpose, desire, I want more, all these different things that are a part of us, all these different things that biologically we're predisposed to have. Our brains are made for it. It's really made up in what gives us all our gifts of being a human being, which makes us different. So not just, I mean, all mammals have this to some degree, but human beings, just our brain structure is there with it. And it ties into so much. I need, this is part of my identity. To put my stamp on the world is a great thing. You know, and think about this. This is a little bit of a side note, but if I am not my expression, what problems come out of that? If I am not who I am, if I am not me and what I feel and connecting that, all right, so if I'm too much me that it's not connecting to people, I'm in a bad spot. I need to pull myself back and go like, wait a minute, let me reassess. We go frozen lake on that. We stop moving and we retrace our steps back. We don't go any further. That's a bad move because we want to connect. You know, our expression should be connecting. Now, of course, you're going to piss people off, but man, you're doing it for the people in front of you and make it a personal connection. But if I'm not expressing, if I'm not able to be my expression, what am I? I'm a repression. I'm a fear. You know, and a lot of times I'm going for what works. I'm going for what is going to make me feel good. I'm going for the result rather than my expression. See that all the time. Fights happen. You know, we end up on the wrong path. We do something that we regret because we can't be our expression. All dysfunction is going to come out of you not being you at some point. It's so important to do that. And it's such a rich dynamic that you can't just be like, hey, be yourself. Be the authentic man or some bullshit. No, man, like the discipline. Man, the attempt, how am I going to bring my best to every situation? How am I going to be me is very important. So that all being said, this is part of our DNA. We need to have purpose. But whenever I hear somebody saying, man, I want purpose, or I need to have relationships, or I gotta fuck tens, I gotta have this amount. No, I gotta be rich. This is so important in my life. You know, I have to have this. I'm in pursuit of it. I want it. And this gets so abstract, especially with purpose and ambition and these things that we can't really put our fingers on. But when we want these things, it's because we're out of function of these things. So there's certain things that we are born to be. There are certain things like basically the myth of the alpha male speech. Go watch it. It's on the 21 convention. It's great. It talks about a lot of this stuff. And where a lot of this philosophy comes from was back in 2014, we were workshopping this stuff in our mastermind calls and our TSL life calls about purpose. And purpose, so much of it where I thought I was going in it is, what is your purpose? Let's look at that. Let's look at why we want this. Let's look at the drive of masculinity and all this bullshit, because it is bullshit. This power of how we're going to get back our identity. Man, we haven't lost our identity. What's happened is we've been irresponsible with it. And there's this guy in the calls that I won't say his name because he doesn't like me to talk about him in a lot of the calls, but he'll say, oh, well, I mean, look, the purpose of my hand is to grab things. to fix things. The purpose of my hand might be to wipe my face. And I'd be like, dude, come on, man. So what's the meaning? The meaning he's like, meaning. When I'm in search for meaning, that's because I'm out of function. So let's say if my hand got cut off. Let's say if I wasn't using my hand or if I was disabled. Then I would start thinking about the meaning of my hand that I missed, that I wanted. And Steve, when you're always talking about sex, he turned it on me. It was great, man. It totally changed the dynamic of a lot of the ways that we think. Is that he's like, when you're not sexually active, when you're out of the function of being a sexual expression of yourself, you are now looking at the purpose of that. That somehow sex gives you more meaning as a man. That somehow sex now gives you meaning in your identity as something. And it's like, well, look, man, we're supposed to have identity. Obviously, it ties into so much and it's in our brains and it's part of how we work. Yes. But there's a very different identity about a sexual man who's sexually active and feeling all of what you're supposed to sexually. And so this is where it gets tricky, because I could say what all of what it's supposed to be is supposed to be, but that's for me. But one of the things that I do know is when you're sexually active is that you are expressing in your whole body. You're not holding anything back. So there's a physical. And there's a physical that could come out carnal, that could come out soft, that could come out like in lovemaking, that could come out rough. There's also an emotional, and that emotional could feel like love. It could also feel empowerment. It could feel, all sorts of stuff. Like you feel on top of the world. It could bring out shame, but there's this emotional expression that comes out. There's also a mental expression of where things change. And so when he's saying when you actually have sex in all those ways, you now know the meaning in your identity through sex. It's fulfilled. You don't need to search for it. So think about that with emotional fulfillment. When we look at why we don't feel that we have purpose or drive, or somehow our identity isn't being represented in the right way, we need to look at all the aspects of what we were born to be. All right. So job, we're not born to have a job. All right. Drive a car. We're not born to drive a car. Talk to 100 people on social media day. We're not born to do that. Like something on Facebook. We're not born to do that. But we are born to connect. We are born to feel comfortable talking in front of people, to feel a connection. I mean, we are born to have that. A lot of people, when they distort evolutionary biology, man, I fucking hate this shit. When people talk about this stuff, it's so unthought through. It is so stupid. I am not an educated man, but I mean, I've talked a lot with professors and evolutionary biologists, and I grew up actually with intellectuals, and it's so funny. I mean, it's so funny. I was even at my brother's wedding, there were tons of professors there, and that you get two different types of intellectuals. You get the real ones who are very open-minded and open to dialogue and discussion. And then you get the ones with chips on their shoulders who are like going for their PhD and they're never going to fully make it. And they always like got to put you down for status. It's crazy. But when you talk to like brilliant minds, I mean, they're very open-minded. I mean, shit, dude, when I was growing up, when I was 16 years old, I lived next to UCI. A lot of my friends, their parents were professors, and we'd interact, and you'd be sitting there, and Chinua Achebe would be there, and he'd want to talk to us. Jacques Derrida would be there, and he'd want to talk to us. And these guys who were like, we didn't know at the time, but they were like, smart people, and they were interested in what people thought. And they loved the progression of exchange of thought and all that sort of stuff. It was fucking awesome, man. And then you meet these people, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry. You misused a word or some bullshit like that. But the thing is that when you get into this evolutionary biology, it gets distorted in so many different ways. And they go, oh, we were intimidated by the other person. No, fundamentally, we wanted to talk to somebody. Fundamentally, if they were the opposite sex and they were hot, we wanted to talk to them. Our drive is to be social. To not see that is ridiculous. To say that approach anxiety comes from the fear of that some motherfucker would kill us, sure, that may be part of it, that we might fear integrating with that other culture. But if you put two cultures next to each other, they will interact. They have to interact. If you take an attractive female from that culture and put her in a visible spot from the other culture, that other culture will talk to that girl. That will happen 100% of the time in all of human existence. Now the individual fear you have might be a little bit different. So things like this, it's not so simple. We always make it so complex to serve our fears to market because we're selling something first rather than finding the truth. Man, it's just so fucked up, right? How we develop thought nowadays. It's really sad. But the thing is that we need to express. And so when we go through our day constantly and we're, our society favor, like, it's so funny. People talk about, like, I honestly think this is a disease. When you go through a breakup, part of the phase of going through that breakup is to go into that mental dysfunction and disorder of labeling your ex as whatever. And so it's like, my ex is I read Sociopath Next Door, and my ex is a sociopath. I read the Psychopath Handbook on the checklist and they're a fucking psycho. It's like, it's so crazy how that happens. Just people just should see that as a normal thing that happens and let it fucking go, and let that shit pass. Don't fucking get caught up down that rabbit hole, because it'll never be fixed. It'll never fix, especially if they are a sociopath. You're not going to change that. You're not going to change that. You're not going to change them. You're not going to change your problem. You're not going to change how you got hurt. You're not going to change all the beautiful things. And you're going to distract yourself from the real growth that you can find from analyzing, what you saw in yourself from that. But that all being said, it's like, when we look at how society functions, it is favoring what a psychopath does. It is more important for me to go down the street and not to pay attention to somebody, to ignore the homeless guy. It is more important to get a job that makes money and has the right status than to go for something that I might be passionate about. So it's more important to fit into the function of society rather than pursue myself. And so socially, we get out of whack in this. So one of the things that you're born to be that will help with your purpose and your sexual frustration and your social frustration is that you can get into the function of talking to people. And you don't need to talk to much, because we weren't born to talk to 100 different people a day. We were born to talk to the 2 or 3 people that we really interacted with. And we might do that with our families or in our insular lives or our jobs, but really, are we really connecting with those people? But there's something about us that where we willfully shut off or think it's okay to shut off the environment around us that fucks us up. That totally fucks us up. It's that basically that sociopathic, psychopathic value that we've learned to fucking love so much. It's so funny that we don't see it that way, man. We favor that in our society. We think of that as a good thing. The more success that you can have, at the expense of giving into your emotions or maybe wasting time with, talking to people or whatever on social media. Social media is an attempt to build that connection, but it's not the connection. So it fails, right? When it comes down to sex, we see sex as pornography. We see sex as, an image. We see sex as an advertisement. We see sex as a sign of status rather than just the connection and expression, which is so normal. I mean, God, we're wearing clothes. We're protecting our private parts. Not saying that we need to rebel and go backwards, but we need to do kind of what the paleo community did, is look at these things and see how we could start integrating them into modern culture. But we need to start seeing sex as normal, right? And then when we get into these different things of like our pursuit of ambition, man has always had this thing where we've wanted to do more. We've wanted to put our stamp on things. We want to take an action that has an identity and a shape to us that is so fundamentally important, right? That is huge. So we need to do that with part of our lives. See, most of the time we're working for somebody else, or we're doing an expression for, man, big time with entrepreneurship for me, because I can technically do whatever I want. But there's so many entrepreneurs that fall into this, but because we're not doing it for our expression. We're doing it because we want status, or it's supposed to be the right thing, or because Gary Vaynerchuk said it was the right thing, or Ty Lopez has 15 Ferraris that he rented for his video, or whatever the fuck it is that is supposed to be success. That's what we're chasing for. And fundamentally, very simply, like if I go out and I build a garden box, or if I put nets on my garden box, or I build a bench or something like that, a very simple, basic thing that I do that I get into that becomes my expression, I stop worrying about that. All right. And it doesn't mean that everybody needs to go do a garden box, but do something that you like. Make something that you like. Get into that. You need to get into the function of it. Otherwise, we're sitting around chasing purpose. Chasing purpose. And it's ridiculous. We'll never be happy because what society's telling us is society's voicing of purpose and not our own. And we need to get with that. That's very key. You know, how do we get a life of social and sexual excellence? Sure, you can see all this great social dynamics and wizardry or whatever, or Steve said this in 2008 and it blew my mind. But if you're not going out and getting socially functional, it's a fantasy. You know, it's not what we do. And then let's look at the flip side. When we overstimulate with sex, when we overstimulate with being social, but we ignore the points and the natural urges of what we are, the expression. If we overstimulate with our creation, getting in a car, going to work, doing things that we don't want to do. If we overstimulate in those ways and we ignore the natural urge of what we are and what we do and all that sort of stuff, our born to be qualities, you know, which is to sleep, which is to eat, which is to breathe, which is to be social, which is to be sexual, which is to pursue life, right? If we ignore all of those things, then what do? We start thinking that we're frustrated about it, we're confused about it, we get angry about it, we try and control it, we label it, we try and control everything around us to make it fit within our sexuality, our social life, our pursuit of passions, our bodies, our sleep, our minds. I mean, when I look at like some of the paleo guys, it's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You're neurotic as fuck. You're taking, 50 supplements a day, 5 supplements a day just to be healthy and normal. You have to perfect your diet to be such a pinpointed thing. You're going to sleep 2 hours, then wake up, and then you're going to do something, and then you're going to work out, you're going to lift this weight, and it's going to be heavy, and then you're going to eat something, then you're going to sleep again for 2 hours. It's ridiculous. Nobody ever needed to have humanity be so complex. It's all because we're out of function. And it becomes very simple, plain, unentertaining when we get into that function. What's the purpose of your hand? Man, I don't know. Who cares? I use it all the time. What's the purpose of your sexuality? To be a man, to do this, and that it's such a birthright. And then we start fighting over stupid shit. Man, we have a bored and lazy culture, man. That's also why it's like everybody needs some reality. The reason why I think there's plenty of reasons why we have wars, but it's lack of resources and scarcity and, politics and all this sort of shit that brings on wars. But part of the reason why we have wars is because our society gets so goddamn fucking bored that they think that the thing that you want to fight for, your identity, is so robbed from that they go and do it. And then guess what happens when you go to war? War is fucked up, man. I've never been, and I don't want to be. But I know plenty of vets. I know how fucking crazy it gets. And it's like, Jesus Christ, it puts some things in motherfucking perspective. In 1999, you started having movies like Fight Club talking about, wow, this is such a cool thing. And I fucking loved it, man, when I was 19 or 20 years old or whenever when I saw it. It was awesome. It spoke my language. And then guess what happened? We had war. We've had the longest war in U.S. history, the invasion of Afghanistan. And you don't hear people saying that, And the only people that you hear looking for an identity are the people that are out of that function. Man, it's crazy. Like, the one thing is that I'll tell you this. If you're that far out of dysfunction and you're looking for purpose, go out and fucking find it. Go out and fucking look for it. Let it fuck you. Let it tear you apart. Man, let it pursue fucking life and all of your lostness and your angst. And that's the route that I took. Fucking do that. Because, man, it'll floor you. And when you fucking quit before it kills you, or you let it kill you, but if you can quit before it kills you, you'll have a little perspective. You'll have a little bit of reality. And, man, that'll give you some taste. So if you're feeling out of purpose and you want to go for it and you're looking at fucking, Navy SEAL, whatever, I'm going to go be a man. Go out and try that, man. If you're looking at guys going out there and fighting, go out and try that. If you're looking at guys going out there and fucking or whatever, go out and try that. Go out and do that, but fucking live it, man. Don't be some bitch on the sidelines that talks about it and looks at the whatever analysis of it, man. Go out and fucking live it. And it will fucking change you. And it will calm you the fuck down, or it will kill you. But if you just go in the mundane, safe area of life and stay and da-da-da-da, man. But anyway, long story message, you don't need to do all that. Just get into function, man. It ain't that big of a deal. Life, biology, the nature of life, the nature of humans in life is very simple, man. If there's food, we eat it. If there's life to express, we live it. What are your expressions that you were born to be? And take those into your daily regimen of life. Eat good, sleep good, be social, be sexual. Those types of characteristics, and you'll calm the fuck down and stop making all this shit a big deal in an emergency for you to somehow empower yourself and other people, and we're constantly under threat and all this other bullshit. Or just fucking go to war and fucking solve that stuff in yourself.